Welcome to your Time Management Revolution. This is Time Management Fixer Helene Segura. In today's episode, I'll be sharing a previously recorded interview during which we're discussing time management and mind management. Enjoy!
When you wake up in the morning, are you raring to go? Or do you think to yourself, what could possibly be the point? Doing what works will help you see it isn't too late to go after your dreams. We talk with experts about everything from getting in shape to finding work you love. We're your guide to a better life. Now, here's your host for Doing What Works, Maureen Anderson.
I was going to talk about New Year's resolutions with my guest on the show today. I really was. She and I agreed to that, but I've been distracted by a larger question of which New Year's resolutions are only a part, and that is, can people change? I mean, really change, not just fake it while they're dating or trying to get a job, but really, truly, deep down change some basic things about their makeup. What do you think? Have you changed something significant about yourself? More importantly, have you given up trying to change something significant about someone else? There's a question for you, isn't it? Well, Daryl Anderson, my husband and producer, and I are looking forward to this hour with the author of The Inefficiency Assassin. Her name is Helene Segura, and she's a time management consultant in San Antonio. You can learn more about her work at helenesegura.com. Hello, Helene.
Hello, Maureen. How are you?
I'm good, thanks to you. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Great.
One thing I did in the last few years to improve my own time management is click on fewer articles about how to do that.
Okay.
Don't you think that's a trap that some of us fall into? We talk about things more than we do them.
Oh, definitely. So many of us have all of these grand plans, and there's nothing wrong with dreaming and setting goals, but the key is which ones do you really want to focus on and accomplish to make sure that you are being successful with those goals or those changes that are truly most important to you.
I heard that if you talk about your goals or your plans too much, your brain is tricked into thinking it's already achieved them, and it doesn't help you work on them. Have you heard that?
I have heard that maybe a couple of times, but your brain definitely does play a part in any kind of change that's going to be made, and there is nothing wrong with talking about it. The key is, are you going to put any plans behind that talk? So I don't think you necessarily trick your brain out of it just from talking about it so much, but if you don't lay the groundwork, then after a while your brain's going to say, oh, okay, yeah, keep on talking about it. Nothing's happening. So I think that can happen.
I think with someone like me, it boils down to energy. I put so much value on conversation that any random exchange with a stranger can quickly turn problematic. I'll either not want to talk at all because I just, I know myself and I can't stay on the surface of things. So it's all or nothing, right? So I'm either very businesslike or totally invested. And then it becomes a matter of energy. Am I going to devote my energy to the talking or the doing? And I think of a marathon runner who ordinarily the most friendly guy you'd ever meet. But before a marathon, and if you caught him in those 2 hours before the race, he would be as cold and distant as the most cold and distant person ever. And he explained it to me one time in terms of an energy conservation thing.
That's very interesting. And when you bring up investing in talking or doing, those two components are actually a part of the 5 stages of change in psychology. And what a lot of people want to do is skip to the action part, which is good, but there are some other stages that need to come first, because the first stage is pre-contemplation, where you're just kind of thinking about that change. It might have entered your mind, or maybe somebody has suggested to you that you need to make that change. And the second stage is contemplation. So that's where you're thinking about it, and that's where a lot of the talking is going to start up. And the third stage is what most people skip in the process of change. That third stage is planning. That's where you look into what resources and what help you need and what kind of timeline you need to have, a realistic timeline to have to make this change. And instead, people skip from stage 2, contemplation and thinking about it, to stage 4, which is action. And because they haven't gone through that stage 3 of planning, they're not as successful with their action. And then if they're not successful with stage 4, then they don't make it to stage 5, which is maintaining what this change is. So that talking component that you mentioned, that is a big part of stage 2 contemplation, but then there needs to be planning before jumping into that action component.
I don't know if we got this far the first time you were on the program, but when it comes to contemplation, my process goes something like this. I'll hear about a way to do life better, and I'll think, that's nuts. And then the second thing is, that's really interesting. And then after a while, that's genius. But you don't adopt a new way of looking at the world instantly. It's just by definition something that is rarely this impulse buy.
Oh, most definitely. And usually, if it's something totally different from what you've been doing or what you've been believing, then of course your first reaction is going to be, oh, that's nuts, that's crazy. But then when you let it stew inside your brain, you're subconsciously starting to think about those ideas, and that's when eventually you'll decide, I was right the first time, that is nuts. Or you might decide, maybe that's not such a bad idea after all.
I think what allows you to do that is by dismissing it out of hand immediately. It kind of takes the pressure off yourself to give it serious consideration. And once that happens, then you're free to have it be like your own idea. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. It's almost like you are freeing up that space for creativity and wondering, and that's when ideas are allowed to happen and take shape.
Because it has to be our idea. We resist any outside influences to our mode of operating, really.
Oh, definitely, especially if that idea has been given to us by a loved one. As humans, we are really bad about accepting ideas from those who are closest to us, because we say, forget it. You're just trying to tell me what to do. And yet, we will listen to a total stranger because we think, wow, that is such a revolutionary concept. Why didn't I think of that before? I mean, this happens all the time. My husband and I joke about it because I figured this out a while back. So when I want him to make a change, I will mention to him, and of course he'll say, whatever. So I will mention it to his best friend, and his best friend will drop this idea about a great change to make or an article that he read, and my husband will say, wow, that's a great idea. And he'll come home and say, hey, guess what Justin said? And I say, oh, Justin is a genius. What a great idea. I've done that with trying to purchase a big screen TV. I've tried that with wanting to go on a trip or getting him to put the toilet seat down at the beginning of our marriage. And so I've learned to use those outside resources to get him to change so he thinks it's his idea.
Where were you 22 years ago when Daryl and I got married? No, what you say, the me yesterday would have bristled a little bit, but the me today who read something online about exactly this now wonders the following. If you make a change because you were manipulated into it, and you find out that you were manipulated, what is your reaction to the change? Well, research shows, apparently, this is from Dan Ariely, by the way, that if you like what the change was, i.e., you're eating better, whatever, you don't care so much that you were manipulated. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, exactly, because in the end, it was a positive change for you. It's not something that hurt you. It's not something that caused you to lose time or sleep or something else. In the end, it was a good change, so that's why there's no resentment there. In the end, my husband was okay with putting the toilet seat down because he realized, it's all right to keep those kinds of things inside the toilet and not, floating around outside. In the end, it was pretty nice to get a big screen TV instead of getting a smaller screen because as we've gotten older, our eyesight has changed and we do need a bigger screen. But I think if I had tried to manipulate him to do something that was bad for him, that's where the resentment would have come in.
Does he know what you're up to?
Oh, he does now. In the beginning, he didn't. And every once in a while, I'll still slip an article on his desk, or I'll say, hey, the newest edition of Texas Monthly came. Feel free to flip through it, but there's an article in there on something that I'd like him to read, and he'll eventually read that article. So I still do that once in a while, but he's pretty much caught on now.
You're making me think something I've long suspected, that if you want somebody to do something, especially within your immediate family, tell them to do the opposite.
Yeah, reverse psychology. That can help too, but I prefer getting them to learn on their own and come up with it because just like you said earlier, when you think you've come up with that idea, then you're much more willing to go along with it.
You wouldn't be in the business you're in if you didn't think people could change.
Precisely. I believe that there is hope for change. If you want this change to happen and you're willing to do the planning that goes into it, then there is definitely hope for change.
Does it depend on the degree to which you're trying to change?
It does. The more radical the change is going to be, then the longer it's going to take to build up to that change, which means that you have to uphold your motivation a lot longer. So if you're going to make a 180-degree change in your life, that's going to take a lot more willpower versus just making maybe a little 5-degree change. So for instance, quitting smoking, that would be a 180-degree change. That's huge. And that's going to take a lot more support, a lot more planning and willpower, but it's still definitely possible to change.
When we come back, what Helene's biggest change in her life has been, I wanted to give her some notice and not put her on the spot. That's ahead on Doing What Works. Welcome back to Doing What Works. I'm your host, Maureen Anderson, posing you a question I'm about to pose my guest, which is, when is the last time you changed something really significant about yourself? And if you haven't done that in a long time, I hope we can inspire you to do it today, because what else is the point of living? I mean, we all want to live an interesting story. And you're probably not going to be doing that if you do the same thing day after day, and the only thing that changes is you complain more about it. So Helene Segura, time management expert and the author of The Inefficiency Assassin, what would you consider the biggest change you've ever made?
I've made a lot of changes in life, but the biggest one happened when I was in my late 20s. And that was dealing with perfectionism. And when some people hear that, they might say, well, what's the big deal about perfectionism? But it can be very debilitating. I would set these really high standards for myself and for others, and then just have a fit if something did not go exactly according to plan. And I was such a perfectionist about everything down to the smallest detail, even how tomatoes were sliced for salsa. I mean, it was ridiculous looking back on it now. But all of that perfectionism just raised my stress levels and raised my blood pressure and gave me these really horrible headaches that were getting close to migraines. And once I realized where the stress was coming from and pinpointed that it was my own personality that was causing me these issues, I realized I had to make a serious change because I didn't want to go on medication for blood pressure or for my headaches. And if I wanted to do this the natural way, then I had to change a part of who I was. And changing a personality trait is very difficult, but in the end I realized that for the sake of my health and also for the sake of my marriage and my relationships with other people, I had to change a part of who I was. So that's been the biggest change.
I look at what you're saying as a wiring change. I mean, you had to change your wiring. How did you?
And that is something that I actually still deal with today because I will catch myself falling off the wagon 20 years later. And what I had to do first off was become very conscious of what it looked like when I was going into perfectionism mode. Because in order to start this change, I had to realize when I was doing it and then tell myself to stop it. And there were many times, especially in the beginning, when I had to literally talk out loud to myself and say, stop what you're going to do. And that can be scary if other people are around you because they're looking at you. And this was in the days before the Bluetooth earpiece. You know, today people can walk around talking to themselves and you just think, okay, they're on a Bluetooth. Well, this was way before then. So if you were talking to yourself, you were talking to yourself. You probably had a little craziness going on. But that was key to it, was understanding what the beginning of perfectionism mode looked like. And I had to be very present and very conscious of what I was doing throughout the day so I could tell myself to stop that.
Two things. Our daughter Katie told me about how she broke a habit that she didn't like, and she said something that struck me as so elegant in its simplicity. The only way to stop is to stop. Mm-hmm. And what you were doing with yourself, thank you for admitting this, by the way, mm-hmm. you were talking to yourself as if you were a toddler, because with a toddler, the only way to get them to stop is to tell them to stop. Mm-hmm. There's no explanation. There's no reasoning. You know, if the kid's young enough, you just stop.
Right. And actually, what your brain will do in the beginning when you're trying this change is it will try to fight past the stop. So the second step is actually doing some reasoning and asking yourself, how will doing this benefit you? It's the same question you can apply to procrastination if that's bothering you, or whatever habit you have that you're trying to break. When your brain tries to work around you telling yourself to stop, then you want to ask yourself that question, how will doing this benefit me?
You can't have the conversation without the stoppage occurring, though, and I appreciate you going into a little bit of detail about that. When we come back, I figured out why I'm not such a fan of New Year's resolutions, and what I did as a substitute for those has worked really well. I want to see what Helene Segura, our resident time management expert, has to say about it on Doing What Works. You are listening to Doing What Works, and we are so happy that you are, because I think there's a possibility that your life can change as a result. I wouldn't do the show if I didn't believe that. And Helene Segura, my guest on the program today, wouldn't do what she does if she didn't believe that good things couldn't happen from making changes in your life, of course. Helene, when I was younger, my list of New Year's resolutions was ambitious. I mean, if you would look at any one list I came up with, you would think to yourself, this person is trying to be perfect. Because every stop talking so much, stop eating so much, study more, do what, it's just everything was covered and it had to be just so. Mm-hmm. By about 2:00 on New Year's Day, something had happened. Everything had unraveled. Uh-huh. And, I started every year feeling just as bad about myself as I ended most years. Mm-hmm. By the time I was a grown-up and had been a grown-up for a while, I had this idea to change one thing about my life for 1 year. For 1 year, I would not eat any junk food at all. I mean, not even a taste of butter. Mm-hmm. And it was truly amazing how many other things, how many other problems I solved just by doing that one thing for not only a year, but 2 months in, I realized, no, this has to be my life because I've never felt this good ever. Mm-hmm. So just by concentrating on one thing, so many other problems just fell away like dominoes. And it strikes me that even if they hadn't, I'd still have that one thing licked.
Right. Exactly. And it's funny you bring this up because the University of Scranton did research and determined that only 8% of folks who set New Year's resolutions are successful with them. And a big reason why is because people tend to choose too many things to change. It's too hard to concentrate. And so you end up being unsuccessful with everything, and then you're just demoralized. Now, you discovered that if you focus on just one thing, you're much more likely to be successful. And when you're successful, you stay motivated, and you're also willing to be open to other changes. So a byproduct of being successful with just one change is that other positive changes can happen along the way. So that's fantastic. And the other thing you mentioned has to do with age. And I don't know if any research has been done on this, but what I've discovered is something similar to what I think you have gone through. In my 20s, when I set New Year's resolutions, looking back on it now, I realized that I would pick apart everything that was wrong with me and have that long list of all these things I didn't like about myself, and this is what I was going to change. And then once I got into my 30s, I started to focus more on self-care and just choosing those one or two things to concentrate on, as opposed to looking at my faults. And then now that I'm well into my 40s, I realize I'm not so much looking at change as I am looking to continue what I have enjoyed doing the year before. So it's like the New Year's resolutions have morphed over the decades.
It's interesting you say that because only yesterday I had an exchange at the post office that was mildly amusing but not hilarious. But I grinned about that for a long time, and I thought, what the heck is going on? My life sucks just as much as it did the day before. Not to get all, a bad week on everybody, but I realized that the night before I'd had enough sleep, and earlier that day, I'd run harder than usual on our run. Mm-hmm. And it told me all over again the most basic things like enough sleep mm-hmm. and really good workouts. I mean, isn't 99% of life just what you said, taking care of yourself?
Exactly, self-care. And most things that happen to us throughout the day require some kind of reaction from us, and that reaction is going to be determined by our brains, whether it's time management, whether it's what to say to somebody else. And if we're not taking care of what is housing our brains, then we're just going to make all of these bad decisions. That's why you hit the nail on the head. It comes down to self-care, getting enough sleep, eating right, exercising, staying hydrated with water. Not necessarily all margaritas or wine. Get some water in there.
Although, I have to share this as a side note. Dr. Mike Roizen, he's known for the real age business. He used to pal up with Dr. Oz all the time on the Oprah show. Mm-hmm. He talked about how much coffee he drinks. It was amazing, like 8 or 9 cups a day. Oh, but he counts it towards his water intake. And I've always heard that you can't count the coffee because of the, I don't know how to pronounce the word, diuretic.
Oh, diuretic, uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's water.
It's water. But you can count it. So I just thought I'd throw that.
Yeah, there are all sorts of different findings. Some people say, yes, you can count any kind of liquid. You can count milk. You can count beer. You can count whatever the liquid is.
So it's margaritas you were talking about.
Yeah, margaritas, a gin and tonic, which is my drink of choice. But in the end, you still need some kind of water in there because a lot of those drinks actually dehydrate you. Alcohol dehydrates you. So you still need some kind of water. You don't necessarily need 64 ounces of water each day, but some kind of water in there to counterbalance anything else that you're drinking, like coffee, that's a diuretic, or alcohol, that is a dehydrator.
And think of what we've been saying once more. Sleep and plenty of time to move. It's a toddler thing. I think one life hack people could adopt immediately to make their life better, and I'm borrowing from Dilbert creator Scott Adams here, but if your brain is a mess and you're in this downward mood spiral, forget about your brain for a while. Do something to nurture your body and see if it doesn't take care of it. It's counterintuitive, but darned if it doesn't work.
Yeah, it does, because everything that we do to our bodies or put into our bodies will eventually affect that brain. So set that brain aside with all of its clutter and just do something good for your body, like get to sleep or go for a 10-minute walk. If you've never walked at all, 10 minutes will do you some good.
Helene Segura is our guest today, and she is an expert on time management. And I've talked to a number of those over the years, but Helene is special to me because she's just fun to talk with, as I hope you are gleaning from the conversation we are having on this program. Helene, again, mentioned in passing smokers. And when we come back, I want to know the one thing that smokers who have smoked for a long time, who quit and never pick up a cigarette again, I want to know the one thing they have in common. That's just ahead on Doing What Works. If you go to Helene Segura, Segura, HeleneSegura.com, you will see her tagline for her business, Kick Chaos to the Curb. Isn't that a fire-up way to think about the new year? Wouldn't we all love to just get rid of everything we don't love about our lives? But as Helene and I have been talking about, so is the path for disaster, to try and get rid of everything all at once. Let's just take one thing that gives some people fits. That's smoking. What is the one thing people who have been smoking for a long time, who never pick up another cigarette, what is the one thing they have in common, Helene?
I'm not a medical doctor, but to me, I would guess that they had the desire to change. And that's what motivates them to make that change. They wanted to do it. It wasn't necessarily forced upon them, or even if it was, they realized that they needed to make that change.
If that isn't the secret to everything we've ever said on this show, nothing is. I've spewed so much advice. We've had so many people spewing so much advice, but I think it all boils down to the following. Do you want it badly enough? Mm-hmm. Because if you don't, go watch another TV show till you're ready. Mm-hmm. And you might never feel ready, but realize that you're going to die having wasted your life. And that, to me, would be the motivator, right? Do you want to finish out your days with the life that you have?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And when I'm working with clients and thinking about at what stage they reach out to me for help, so many people wait until they are in dire circumstances versus being a little more proactive and getting that help or making those changes sooner so they're not as stressed out. So with smokers, the subject that we're talking about, it would be great if somebody who wanted to stop smoking didn't wait until they were told that they were going to have to be on oxygen. Why not start that change sooner so you can have a better quality of life for many more years. But it comes down to how badly do you want to make that change? Just exactly what you said, Maureen.
I think it's also a matter of the following. Who do you want to be? I have made big changes in my life that were forced upon me. And to this day, I think, I can't really take that much credit for life going in a better direction, because really, what choice did I have? The changes I felt the best about were when I was just slowly marching toward boring land and decided, there's more you can do with yourself. And it changed how I feel about myself as a person, that I would step up when nobody was forcing me to. I mean, that's a good thing to be able to say about yourself.
Oh, definitely. And that's just going to increase your self-confidence. And when your self-confidence is increased, you're going to be a lot more successful with other changes because you realize, I can do this. And that's why with my clients who struggle with change, we always start with something small so that way they can feel that success a whole lot sooner. Because once they feel that success, it can start to become a little addictive. You want more, you want more, you want more, and you realize that you can get more.
As of the smartphone, I can't imagine too many people who do anything but drift through their lives and respond to the latest interruption, of which there are an infinity. The most fascinating part of your work to me is that you would have any clients, because it takes a certain amount of introspection and quiet to even realize, I don't know what I want. I need help figuring it out. I mean, where do your clients come from?
Well, they come from all sorts of different backgrounds, and usually their brains are absolutely swirling because they think that they're chasing these dreams that they have and these goals that they have, but when I ask them what those specific dreams and goals are, they can't articulate it. So we have to end up talking about, if you're trying to hit a bullseye, how do you know how successful you are if you don't know what that bullseye is? So whether it's a doctor, an attorney, a housewife, no matter who you are, you need to understand where you're coming from and where specifically you would like to go. Because if you don't have at least one specific that you're trying to reach, you're just out there wandering aimlessly and not knowing whether or not you're successful, and that's why you keep chasing your tail.
And you might be the first person who ever told these people it's okay to take that time for yourself and think about the answer to that one question.
Oh, absolutely. And in our society today, we are very action-oriented. We feel like we need to be moving or talking or doing something, and that is a sign of success. If we're typing on a keyboard, we must be productive because our fingers are moving. When that's not necessarily the case. So we need to start realizing that thinking is also doing, because the more thought you put into something and the more clarity you get on the subject, then you're going to have a much more efficient pathway in getting you to where you want to go.
It's too bad there isn't a sign you could put on your forehead, though, that says, I'm not goofing off. I'm thinking about something important. When we come back, the best time management tip I've ever heard, I will let Helene riff on that. This is Doing What Works. You're listening to Doing What Works. I want you to fill in this blank. My life changed when? I'll go first. My life changed when I realized that it's not just deciding what I want to do, but when I'm going to do it. Because if I don't know exactly when during the week this is going to happen, it's not going to happen. I want to run this particular life hack by my guest on Doing What Works today. Her name is Helene Segura. You can learn all about her work and her book, The Inefficiency Assassin, at HeleneSegura.com. Helene, that is really the essence of how I function these days. If I don't know when I'm going to do something, I kiss it goodbye.
Mm-hmm. That's excellent, because there's so many people out there who have this long list of ideas and thoughts or tasks that they want to accomplish, but they have no idea when they want to do it. And so they're basically just accomplishing whatever happens to be thrown right in front of them. There is no plan. And when we talk about having an idea of when to do something, it's not like you have to have every single minute of your day scheduled out, but for all of those important items that you want to accomplish, you should have an idea if you're going to do that on a Wednesday morning or a Thursday evening, because the more structure like that you can build into your day, then the more free time you'll have for fun things.
I look at it almost like a closet, and you have a finite number of hangers. Let's say you had a finite number of hangers. You're not going to be able to put more clothes in until you take some out. And I think this is where some of us get hung up. Mm-hmm. To do what's important to us, we're going to have to say no to some, maybe a lot of people, and risk their wrath. And I think that then begs the question, whose approval matters more to you? Mm-hmm. The person who is doing the tisting. I can't, that's ironic. I can't pronounce tisting.
Just one tisk is fine. The tisking.
Yes. Or the person who's hitting the pillow, which would be you.
Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so important. We talked earlier about how you need to sit down and think about what you want and who you want to be. Understanding what your priorities are, who's most important to you in your life, what's most important to you in your life. When you look at what those priorities are every single day, you'll have that reminder of who it is you're living for. And you should be at the very top of your own list, because if you're not taking care of yourself, then you really can't take care of everybody else around you, at least do a good job of it anyway. And once you realize that, it becomes easier to say no to those other things out there and not have as much fear about disappointing somebody else or making somebody else angry, because you realize you have just said no so you can benefit yourself in your life, so you can live a better life and also better help those around you.
One benefit of being older is realizing that you can't please everyone because they disagree with each other. Yeah. It's mathematically impossible. So you might as well pick yourself, because they are. They're picking themselves. Add yourself to the mix is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not suggesting that everybody becomes an egomaniac and only thinks about me, 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 me. I'm not going to do anything for anybody else. Instead, you need to take a more critical look at what is it that you're doing to and for everybody else, and how much of that time is going to be spent on you and supporting you and your needs and nurturing your body and yourself, versus always dropping everything for yourself to go help everybody else. So think about, you can still help others, but how much time do you want to devote to them? 90% of your time, 80% of your time? Take a look at how much you're helping yourself versus everyone else around you.
We are almost out of time, but I think we're closing on a good point, which is, if you're happy and you're taking good care of yourself, you'll be able to help so many more other people.
Oh, most definitely, because if you are ill or if you're not thinking clearly, it's going to take you so much longer to do things for other people, let alone yourself. So why not take care of yourself first, so that you do have more time to give to yourself and to others?
I had mostly sworn off time management consultants and career consultants on Doing What Works. The fact that Helene is back a second time to talk with us, and I hope not for the last time, shows you what I think of her work. If you go to HeleneSegura.com, you can learn much more about that. Helene, thank you for being with us.
Oh, thanks, Maureen. It's my honor.
That will do it for this edition of Doing What Works.
This broadcast of Doing What Works is copyrighted by North Shore Productions. To learn more, please visit MaureenAnderson.com.